The great ones, they're different. They really are. Not better, just different. Sure, there's a physical power, a mental strength, a complex but resolute constitution too. There's a whole lot more than just the measurables. That's something else, that intangible. It separates us from them. Welcome to the Legends series on Andy Raymond Unfiltered. This one, he had it all. Every attribute needed to build a footballer, he had it. There was nothing he couldn't do. Among the absolute best in the country, all the while with a certain charm and decency that was born by the country. But who is Laurie Daley?
I think he's someone that's genuine, someone that cares, and someone that's very honest. I think all those things probably sum me up, and a good friend, regardless of who they are. If they're a mate, they're a mate.
244 games for your beloved Canberra Raiders, 26 origins, 26 tests. Where did the love of rugby league begin?
The love for me, Andy, was when I played football in the backyard growing up in Junee. I grew up in a family of 8. I've got 7 sisters. I was lucky enough that I lived next door to my cousins, and they had a family of 8 as well, but they were 6 boys and 2 girls. So I was able to spend the majority of my time in their backyard, and in the summer you'd play cricket, in the winter you'd play rugby league, you'd play all types of sports. And I suppose it was the influence that my older cousins had on me, running around in the backyard with them, playing football, just seeing what they did and how they went about things, and then basically just watching games of football when I was young on television. That's how my love started, and that's where it all happened, in the backyard of my cousin's house.
Anyone that saw you play as a mid-teen said you were a freak. You were playing A-grade for the mighty Junee Diesels at maybe 15. As the story goes, you were spotted by the legendary Don Furner at a young age and signed to Canberra, but the Steelers came knocking too, didn't they?
Yeah, I was offered a trial with the Steelers, and I went down with a guy by the name of Ricky Keast, and Rick ended up playing lower grades for South Sydney, and he was a wonderful footballer. We both went down there and we trialled, and obviously we didn't get picked up by the Steelers, but I came back home and was lucky enough to play first grade for Junee. And Don Furner had actually captain coached Junee to a premiership in the 60s.
Okay.
And Don knew a lot of people in town, and obviously because I was only 16 and playing first grade, sort of word filtered back to Don that there was this young guy playing first grade, you should come and have a look. So obviously Don was able to sort of drive over and had a look at me playing, and I sat down with myself and my parents, and obviously wanted me to go and play with the Raiders. And he sold me the vision of the club and spoke about how they were a young team that was on the rise, and they just signed a couple of really successful players. I think Mel was there probably 12 months before. I think he came in 85 with Gary Belcher.
Yep.
And just started to speak about what type of club Canberra was, and the fact that it was probably only 2.5 hours from home was another contributing factor. And I had some offers from a couple of other clubs. But my heart was probably with the Raiders, and more so about Don coming and showing some interest, and then it being closer to Junee.
You can't get away with that, Loz. Which other clubs had a little bit of a nibble?
Manly. Certainly Manly were one. The Roosters were another. And for me, it was all about being a young boy and probably growing up in the bush. I never thought that I would really probably fit in straight away to the city. So I elected to sort of go to Canberra. It felt more like it was going to be home for me. I was a country boy, born and bred, and I just felt as though Canberra would be the perfect fit.
It is a big life transition, isn't it, for a young bloke from Junee, even moving to Canberra, which isn't a huge city. But for a young fella that grew up with 7 sisters that babied him the whole way through, and they did, mate, it's a big, big transition.
Yeah, it's daunting. I can remember, when I first left home, I remember going to live with a family at night time in your bedroom. You'd be sort of crying yourself to sleep because you missed your family, you were homesick.
Yeah.
In Canberra, I actually lived in Queensland to start with. So, Queensland was a reasonably sized place, a lot bigger than Junee, but it was still first time I'd ever lived away from home. And given I was a bit of I was probably, soft in terms of being a mummy's boy and had everything done for me. It was the first time in my life that I had to show a little bit of independence and learn to do things. And that was quite strange for me. And then, going into this football club, turning up knowing absolutely no one, being a shy boy, just sitting there waiting to take directions and being told what to do, not being open to going up and saying g'day to people, more sort of conservative and sort of sitting back and waiting for people to say g'day to me before I'd approach them. And, if someone spoke to me, I'd speak back to them, but I'd never start a conversation. And, I was a bit shy. And I think football sort of helped because once you start training and once you start to play, you start to form bonds and friendships. And that's where it all happens for me, or happened for me.
From that answer, I want to talk about your mental toughness and your resilience, which I admire and have admired for 20 years. Natural or something you had to manufacture?
I think a bit of both, Andy, to be honest with you. I think, growing up in the country, I suppose we always felt, though, growing up in the bush, we didn't, we probably thought we couldn't achieve because we didn't have the facilities. We weren't playing against, other guys in tougher competitions, so to speak. We were probably like the little brother that always carried a bit of a chip on his shoulder that, he wasn't getting looked at. And I just think that sort of made me determined when I got my opportunity that, growing up, I always wanted to prove people that I could do something. And then as you get in the system, you develop skills to become resilient. You develop skills to be tougher and test yourself and not give up. And I think that was one of the things I learnt with the Raiders. It's not about giving up to someone else, it's about giving up to yourself. And everyone's threshold of pain or threshold of being strong mentally is completely different. But as long as you know you've done everything in your power and you've done it to the best of your ability and you haven't given up, I think that's a strong trait to have.
Who's mentally tough in your eyes? Is there someone from those early days you looked at on the training field or the playing field and you thought, okay, that's what I want to be like. He's the benchmark. Yeah,
I think when I first started with the Raiders, guys like Dean Lance was one guy that was tough and mentally strong. You'd watch him on a Tuesday night and, he'd bash himself around during a game on a Sunday. And Dean had bad knees and shoulders and a lot of other things were breaking down on him. But, the way that he attacked the game and played the game and the way that he would be after a game and then to see him back up at training, hobbling around on his knees. But he was one of those guys that really wanted to be out there and competing and showing everyone, regardless of the injury that he carried, that he wanted to still be a part of that environment. And I think, that sets a great example for all the other players in the team. They look at Dean, who was captain at the time, saying, oh, that's our captain out there. He's doing it. And, he could easily sit on the sideline and, have ice on his legs and, receiving physio from the physio, but treatment from the physio. But he wasn't like that. He was a guy that wanted to lead by example all the time and be out there leading the way. So he was a guy that I reckon was mentally tough. Then, of course, you got Mal. Mal broke his arm, I don't know how many times. And there was always a question mark about whether he would come back the same player. And he probably broke it, Andy, probably 4 to 6 times.
Yeah.
And he went through a really rotten trot between 87 and probably 90, where he just kept on injuring it. And there were some real concerns that he might not ever come back. But he went through that period to going on and captaining the Raiders to premierships and becoming an immortal and one of the all-time great players. So he was another one that showed great resilience as well.
You're listening to Andy Raymond Unfiltered, the Legends series. We have corporate and private sponsorship packages available. You set the terms. For further information on how you can become part of the team, go to the website andyraymondunfiltered.com.au and hit the sponsorship tab. Laurie, what did you possess physically? Was that natural talent or was that coach talent or was it a combination?
Oh, I think I was a naturally talented kid.
Yeah.
Looking back now, I can say that, but at the time, I never thought I was. I thought I just had to work extremely hard,
Yep.
and I did work extremely hard. But it was raw talent, and one thing you find as you progress through the grades that raw talent is not enough. You have to be disciplined. You have to be working on your skills. You have to be mentally strong. You've got to be able to handle setbacks, and all those things happen to you at some stage during your football or sporting career. So I think while I always had natural talent, if I didn't apply myself and I didn't have strong leaders around me at the time and strong coaches, then you could have quite easily gone off the rails. So I was lucky the environment I was in was conducive to me being able to be the best player I was. And, the coaches, the players, they all make you better. And when you're in a professional environment, that's what they want for you, because at the end of the day, if you're bettering yourself and you're getting better, well, you're helping the team. And the team is all about having that success at the end of the year, winning premierships. It's not about playing for individual awards. It's about playing to win the comp. And that's what I was lucky enough to be a part of at Canberra.
Loz, what do you remember of your first grade debut? The year was 1987.
I actually played against West and I scored a couple of tries. I actually recall the lead up to me being in that team. I think I played a couple of weeks beforehand the Bulldogs in the SG Ball.
Yep.
And I'd scored a few tries and in those days, because I was a contracted player, even though I was playing in Jersey Fleet and Bradley Clive was playing in SG Ball, we had to turn up for training with the first grade teams because on the Tuesday night you'd have a club session.
Yep.
So, the 23s, reserve grades, first grades, and anyone else that was contracted, young guys, they'd have to turn up and you'd train as a club. So I turned up on this particular night and I didn't know whether Wayne Bennett knew who I was or not. I just turned up every Tuesday for 6 weeks and 7 weeks and, no one had said anything to me. I just, ran around and did what I had to do. And Wayne sort of pulled me aside and he goes, and I'd scored a couple of tries against Canterbury and he goes, how do you reckon you went on the weekend? And I had a really good game, but I wasn't going to say that to Wayne. I said, I went okay. I probably could have done X, Y, and Z a little bit better. And Wayne, in the fashion that only he can do, he said, well, if that's the best you got, he said, the Raiders are in some trouble, aren't they? And walked away. And I just went, wow. Geez,
brutal.
The coach doesn't like me here. And then about, I reckon, 2 weeks later, he picked me from, I think I progressed, I went to 23s, and then he selected me out of 23s into the first grade side. So it all sort of happened pretty quickly and happened around Origin time. So I think he was just obviously trying to keep my feet on the ground without letting me, get too carried away and realising that, I may have had some talent, but if you want to play first grade, then you're going to have to continue to work hard and it's not going to come easy to you. So, so he sort of put me back in my place a little bit and then sort of a couple of weeks later, just out of nowhere, sort of gave me an opportunity.
I don't know what's a better one, that one or the Brent Tate story, who we interviewed on the Legends series a few weeks back. And Brent was playing for the Broncos and was selected to make his Queensland debut. And they were at a presentation night with the Broncos when it was announced. And Wayne walked up to Tatey, as the story goes, and says, "Congratulations, but that's only 4 people's opinion," and turned and walked away.
He was quite brutal at times, Wayne, but he was straight to the point and never mucked around with his words. But if you came back and you were proving him wrong, he admired that, or he would be giving you some words of encouragement in his way.
Yep.
Because he knew you had plenty of talent and you weren't utilising that talent. And it'd be either a ship up or ship out type mentality with him. But he just knew what to say at the right moment. He knew what buttons to push. And I think anyone that's been coached by him has so much respect for him, because he was very big on discipline, and very, very good at being able to push the right buttons to get you to be at your best. And not only at your best, playing-wise, but also training-wise.
He certainly read a lot of Vince Lombardi books, that's for sure. At the end of that year, you and Glenn Lazarus actually sat on the bench for the grand final but didn't get a run.
Yeah, that was 1987, and I was wrapped. I was 17 years of age, sitting on the bench for a grand final. So, to be perfectly honest, looking back now, I sat there and I really wanted the Raiders to win, but it was like, how good is this? Like, I'm just in heaven here, sitting on the bench. So, regardless of what happens, I've had a great year. So I probably wasn't as invested as a lot of the other guys were.
Yep.
Because highly unlikely that I would have got a run. I was just there on standby, and I was only 17, so I really didn't think anything of it other than, we'll win more comps, or we'll get opportunities to play in grand finals. Now, whether that was arrogant or not, I'm not quite sure, but that's what I was feeling. And I think Canberra really came alive in 87 when the Raiders made the grand final. And, they had ticker tape parades before the grand final, and it was just one of those things that you'll always remember, because everyone was just excited. And regardless of what happened on grand final day, it was always a successful year for the club. It was their first ever grand final they'd been in, and a lot of people had doubted the Raiders because when they first came in, they used to get hammered all the time. A lot of people thought they'd never be a successful club, but we certainly proved a lot of people wrong. So for me, I remember sitting on the bench. I also remember how hot it was.
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe, and it was. It would have been close to 35 degrees. Jeez. It would have been over 30 degrees on that particular Sunday. And I remember warming up, and it was just so warm, and everyone was just, sweating before we sort of left the dressing sheds. And it was also the last grand final at the SCG against that wonderful Manly side coached by the great Bob Fulton. So plenty of good memories out of that. But it sort of, for me, while it was disappointing to have lost and not gone on, I was just extremely happy as a 17-year-old that I was just sitting on the pine.
It sounds like you almost thought you were a guest in first grade. Was there a moment, was there a year, was there a game that it felt like you belonged?
Yeah, that's probably true, Eddie. I don't think I ever felt comfortable in 1987, even though I played a couple of games. I never thought that I was a first grader, and never thought that I was a regular in the team. We spoke about Mal earlier. I got my opportunity in 1988. We played I think it was a sevens tournament at Parramatta.
Yeah.
And if my memory serves me correctly, I think Mal played and broke his arm in that game. And the centres for the Raiders at that time were Peter Jackson and Mal Meninga.
Yes.
And Chris O'Sullivan was 5'8". So if the season started, Mal Meninga and Peter Jackson would have been the centres.
Yep.
And I wouldn't have been given an opportunity. So as it turned out, Mal broke his arm, and I was able to get a run as the centre. So I had that opportunity and made the most of it. And then I ended up, I think I might might have played country that year. I think I played country that year with the likes of Peter Sterling, and Warren Ryan was the coach. And I like the name of John Doherty, who was a legend, Joe Cool. So for me, it was all sort of, I never felt comfortable, and it wasn't until halfway through '88 and I made that countryside that I thought, oh wow, rightio, I'm in this first grade side. And then you started to worry about, well, when Mel comes back, where am I going to fit into this team? And it's amazing that, we never, in '88, the Raiders probably had the best crop of players that the club have ever had.
Yes.
But for whatever reason, we couldn't all get on the field at the same time. And we didn't. We made the semis, but we didn't win the competition. But with the squad that we had, we probably should have that year. But that was the year that I started to feel comfortable, probably halfway through '88.
Any elite athlete will tell you it takes more than just being physically fit to be at your best. And our friends at Galaxy Finance can have you at the top of your financial game. From home loans to investments and self-managed super funds, they provide complete solutions. Call Galaxy Finance on 1300 91 7740 and mention you heard it on Andy Raymond Unfiltered to get an obligation-free chat to see how Galaxy Finance can assist you. In '88, Ricky Stewart and Brad Clyde arrived. The year before, yourself, Peter Jackson, Glenn Lazarus arrived. And then in 1989, everything just clicked. It would change your life forever and for the better, that grand final. And it wasn't just a grand final. It was an historic one because it was Canberra's first. But it is still the grand final that rates right up there when we are talking best ever.
Yeah, and I think most people regard it, Andy, as the greatest grand final of all time, and there's a lot of obviously different reasons for that, but it wasn't all rainbows and butterflies to start with. At the start of '88, I actually dislocated my shoulder, and I looked like being out for the year, but they said that I could continue to play if I strengthened it. So I strengthened my shoulder, and then I got through the whole season, and they thought, well, you're okay. You don't need an operation in the off season. Then I was, it was in November, maybe early December. We had to do a promotion, and it was with the basketballers, the Canberra Cannons at the time. And so anyhow, we were doing this sort of promotional thing with them on the basketball courts, and I'd actually put my hand up to stop one of the passes going to another player, and my shoulder popped out. So I had to get my shoulder operated on, a reconstruction in December of '88. So I sort of was struggling to get back for the start of '89. And then the start of '89, we lost, I think, our first 3 games, and then we may have won a game, and then we lost a couple of games. And there was talk that Tim Sheens was under the pump, and there was talk that Tim Sheens was going to get the sack. And everyone was sort of just going, wow, this could be very ruthless here. They sacked Tim after 2 years. And then our results were sort of up and down, and we never really got going as a team. And then I remember we played a game in Perth, and we scored in the last couple of moments. And I think it was Matt Wood scored in the corner, and that kept us alive. And I think we had to win, I think it was 7 or 8 games if we were to win the grand final. But if we lost that game against the Bulldogs over in Perth, then we would have been out. But somehow we managed to win, and then we won again, and then we just found our rhythm, we found our confidence, and we found our zone, and we had great belief in each other. So it's amazing how things can turn pretty quickly. From the start of the year, inconsistent losing, coach being on the verge of being sacked, to sort of all of a sudden finding your rhythm, finding your form, and just going on and winning that comp in '89.
I interviewed Mal Meninga recently. He said of 89, Canberra, the city, grew a soul with that win. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think that's when the Raiders were certainly a household name. 87 was probably the start of it.
Yep.
When they made the grand final. And then 89 when they won, it was just unbelievable, the amount of support that we had. I can still remember there would have been tens of thousands of people. There would have been at least 10, 15,000 people at the airport. There would have been thousands of people lining the streets from the airport into Queensland and into Camp, and then from Queensland into Canberra. They had 2 league clubs at the time. And then there was thousands at the club, and then outside the clubs, there was just thousands of people. It was something I'd never seen before, ever experienced before. And it was just great to be a part of. And I think Mal said after that game, that was his greatest moment in the sport. And to see someone like Mal, who played for Australia and, Queensland and represented, both those jerseys with great distinction. To see him crying after the game was pretty special. And for us, it was a lifetime of thinking and dreaming about winning a competition, but never actually thinking you would be a part of it. Yeah, I used to watch the ABC Match of the Day as a kid and used to just, before the game, watch half-time, go out and kick a footy, come back in at half-time, sit there and watch the game and go back out after the game and kick a footy around and, just dreaming that you could play one NRL game and watch the grand finals and think, how good would that be? And it's amazing, when you reflect back and you think about your career and you think about where you were at different stages of your life when you were a young man growing up, and that's all you wanted to do, and then to be able to achieve it was pretty special.
If you want to feel old, I'll reference it by saying that was 31 years ago. Wow. Mate, during the celebrations, did you break the Winfield Cup, Laurie, or not? Or are you claiming innocence still?
I'm still claiming innocence. I tell you, Andy, I'll tell you the truth. So, obviously, we're out celebrating all night, and we hadn't been to bed. And we have this civic parade. So, we've got this parade. We're all in open-top cars, and we're going from Queensland to Canberra. And I don't know who it was, but someone gave me the trophy. So I'm sitting at the back with the trophy, and I'm, I've had a few. I've had more. Yeah. And anyway, we're going along at a reasonable pace, and, you're doing a bit of layering up, you're waving to people and carrying on and yelling out and shouting and how good. And then I felt the car starting to slow down. So I've sort of got my arm around the trophy and the car starts to slow down. And I thought, oh, beautiful, beautiful. I had probably about that much left in my beer.
Yeah.
Had a bottle of beer. So the car starts to slow down. So as the car slows down, I think, oh, this is a good time to have a mouthful. So I pick up my beer and I start to sort of chug it down just to finish it. And I was going for a bit of a scull because, I wanted to layer up with people around. So as I've sort of gone and had the big scull, the guy driving the car, he accelerates. Oh. So I've got my arm off the trophy. I'm trying to scull a beer. So as you can imagine, he goes to take off. I'm sort of forward and I'm thinking about myself because I didn't want to embarrass myself and fall off the car. And then I've forgotten about the trophy. So the trophy falls over. Oh. And at the base of the trophy, it just cracks. And it was Arthur Summons' arm was cracked. Norm Provan's leg was cracked. Still the first guy, by the way, to bring those two blokes down in the one tackle and cause a break. But all our photos that we celebrated with that day, if you have a look closely, all around the base of the trophy is towels. We had to wrap the towels around it to keep it together with tape. And we're holding this trophy up in the middle of Canberra in the civic square there, and there would have been probably 40, 50,000 people. And in the photos, all you can see is the towels wrapped around the base. So it was, I'm blaming whoever gave me that trophy. It shouldn't have went to me.
I love it. In '89, you debuted for New South Wales, 12 months later for Australia. For a boy from Junee, is it hard to articulate properly just how important those two milestones were?
Yeah. Oh, look, '89 for me, Andy, was just an unbelievable season. And it started with making my Origin debut because only a couple of years earlier, I was sitting at home watching New South Wales and getting upset when they were getting beaten by Queensland, being so happy when they won. And then to actually walk into the dressing shed in 1987 as a 16 or 17-year-old boy and see a guy like Mal Meninga, and you're just going, well, I don't know whether to go up and ask him for a photo or get an autograph or just sit there and wait till he says g'day to me, or do I say g'day to him? Do I put my hand out and shake his hand? You just don't know, you're just unsure of yourself. So '89 was probably surreal. And I was, again, just probably happy to make the Origin team. And I remember sort of playing in that game and I was marking Mal, and Mal had a blinder, and I think he obviously scored plenty of points that game, and I had stud marks all the way down my front. He just terrorised me. I was goal kicking. I missed my first shot at goal from in front. Probably hit the ball boy because he would have been standing somewhere off to the left. But yeah, it was, and I loved it because we were coached by Jack Gibson too, another person that you grew up reading about. But to come up against that Queensland side, honestly, when I ran out, the loud roar of Suncorp was something I'd never experienced, and you could just see that look in their eye that they wanted to basically just get into you. And and I didn't probably understand enough about the history of Origin. And it just showed you how passionate they were. And I never really played my best that first year in Origin. And after game 2, I was injured, but I reckon I would have been dropped anyway because I just didn't perform well. And I always said to myself, geez, I hope I get another opportunity here because I'm better than that. And I just didn't perform as well as I should have. And I was probably overawed and sat back and sort of just was, just didn't really get involved as much as I should have. So I always thought to myself, if I ever get another opportunity, I certainly won't be sitting back and not having a crack. I'll go for it. But I just had to wait and bide my time, I suppose.
A centre that would move on successfully to 5'8". This is a two-pronged question. What's your preferred jersey, and where do you think you played your best football?
Well, I like playing 6. I liked it because I got my hands on the ball a lot more, and I was a running 5'8". I wasn't a ball playing 5'8", although I probably developed some of those skills as I got older. I loved the fact that I was able to play centre early because it gave me a better understanding of what a 5'8" is looking for, and for me what a centre is looking for. So when I moved into 5'8", I actually knew and understood what the centre was trying to do. I understood what type of ball he wanted. I understood what he needed. And I always preferred number 6. I love the fact that I could get my hands on the ball. Sometimes as a centre, you know, if you want the ball, you've got to go looking for it. Sometimes the ball doesn't come to you, so you've got to go looking for it. But as a 5'8", you could get the ball. You could either go in as a first receiver, or you could stand, with a little bit of width and receive a ball. And I was lucky enough that I played with, I rate the greatest halfback in Ricky, because his game helped my game, and we just suited each other. Ricky could throw a 30-metre spiral and I could be on an edge straight away. He could take out 3 or 4 defenders with a pass. And that just made my job so much more easier.
Laurie, I recall, and I think it was you telling me, at different times either you or Ricky Stewart, who is your halfback, would basically stay out of a set of 6 and assess what the defence was doing to plan for your next set. As a footy tragic, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, well, that was Tim Sheens. Tim Sheens used to have this saying for us. He used to say, one works them and one sets them. And by that he meant, at times someone has to take responsibility of working out, if you're under the pump, what are we going to do in the next play? What are we going to do in the next set? So it might be Ricky, and Ricky would be playing on the ball, and Ricky would be just organising what was going on. So, I'd have the opportunity to sit back and say, well, righto, I've just assessed what's happened here. Next time we get the ball, let's look at X, Y, and Z. Majority of the time, though, it was probably more so Ricky that would be looking and seeing and assessing. But that was the little saying that we had. One works them and one sets them. And that worked for us. It might not work for everyone, but it's something that I still believe can happen today. And I still see it in games of football where, you see players and in particular playmakers making wrong decisions and not finishing their sets, and then, they have 2 or 3 bad sets in a row. We were always taught that don't go any more than, you can't have any more than 2 sets in a row where they've been poor. You can't finish the set poor 2 sets in a row. If you do, you're going to put your team under enormous amounts of pressure. So if you feel as though you're on the back foot for one set and the team's coming at you again, you've got to work out and have someone in the team that you trust and follow, that they've got the plan for you to be able to bring you back into the contest. And that's where we were lucky that, if Ricky wasn't doing it. And the other guy who was extremely good at it and probably never got the greatest recognition that he should have, and he was the best player I've ever seen at identifying numbers. So when I mean numbers, if we had 4 attackers and they had 3, he would know when to get the ball and know when to just go, bang, here, we're going to do this little 4-on-3 on the opposition. And that was Barry Belcher, our fullback. So Badge was another one who could just sit back and watch. And if you watched any of Gary Belcher's highlights, he was the guy that actually, I reckon, I certainly learned a lot from, and where I learned about counting numbers. And I reckon Rick might say the same. He was the best I'd ever seen at being able to sum it up and know that, if there's 4 there and we've got 5, well, that's where we're going. And he'd call the ball. And we have this overriding call called super. So sometimes, the dummy half gets it. I want the ball. Ricky would want the ball. And it was always said to us that if the super call is not there just to get the ball, the super call is all about when you have identified a weakness in the opposition and you've identified a 4-on-3 or something like that in the setup, and you call it, and then the dummy half knows it's got to go to you rather than just calling it for the sake of getting a run. And that's another thing that we used to always sort of do, because I'd want the ball, Ricky'd want the ball, and Badger'd go super. And he'd invariably take the right options. Or if I wanted the ball and Ricky saw something, he'd call super and he'd get the ball. And vice versa. So it worked really well. But you were always under the pressure because you couldn't do it just to get a run. Because when you reviewed the tape, if the ball went to you, Shenzi would say, well, why are you getting the ball?
And you get exposed.
And he'd say, well, Rick, did you call super? And he'd go, yes. He goes, Laurie, why did you call the ball? And unless you saw another option and you said, well, I called super too.
Yeah.
And Steve Wallers used to say, if Ricky and I were both calling super, he would go to Gary Belcher. But yeah, that was something that we always sort of did, and we did that well. But Badge was a master at it.
In part 2 of the Laurie Daley story, the accolades and the truth about a split that threatened one of the game's great partnerships. We hope you're enjoying Andy Raymond Unfiltered. To help us spread the word, we'd love a 5-star rating and review wherever you're listening. Come back soon, legends. Welcome back to Andy Raymond Unfiltered, Laurie Daley, Champion, Gentleman, Part 2. In Part 1, we spoke debuts for the Canberra Raiders and New South Wales Blues, and the magical 1989 Grand Final. The story continues. Premiership in 89, again in 90, this time against Penrith, but then the clouds gathered. The club was caught in a salary cap scandal, and from memory, it was the first story like this that we'd really seen at such magnitude.
as a player, as a young player, easy or difficult to ignore and cope with?
I think it was difficult at the time, but I don't think it would have been as bad as what it would be now. With all platforms of media and social media. Yep. We obviously got found that they were paying players above salary cap, and we got all contracts were null and void, so the Raiders had to then come back underneath a cap, and they had to release a lot of players. And we struggled in 92, so we made 89, 90, 91 grand final. We won 90, 90, 89, 90, and we lost 91. But then at the end of 91, because we had to release a lot of players, the likes of Brent Todd, the likes of Glenn Lazarus,
Yep.
the likes of Wayne Collins, David Barnhill, Nigel Gaffeys, all these guys that were very good players and played first grade, they had to leave. And the club had made a decision that they were going to sign a couple of players and then try and build the club around that. And that was probably the only time in my career I thought, oh shit, this might be, we mightn't have enough money here. A couple of us might have to move on because the Raiders have to work to the salary cap, and they might not have enough to pay everyone what they think they're worth. So with everyone being off contract, then you're allowed to go and talk to other clubs. So again, I was speaking to the Dragons and the Magpies at the time, and probably that was the closest I came to leaving Canberra. After speaking to the Dragons and West, I certainly considered both their offers. But in the end, that emotional attachment to the club that I had was too strong a bond with some of the players that were there, and we wanted to continue to try and build success. And we were able to come out the other side of it and then go on and be successful after that. But it did take 12 months.
We can't leave the early 90s alone without talking about the 1990 Kangaroo Tour, an old school, long Kangaroo Tour. And for the boy from Junee, the first real long trip overseas. I remember a few of the boys saying 52% footy, 48% fun. Is that about the right split?
Might have been the other way around. Look, it was one of the best things I've ever done to go away on a Kangaroo Tour. I can remember 4 years earlier, I'd get up in the middle of the night in Junee and watch Kangaroo games and just sit there and idolising and go, wow, how good would it be to play over there in front of crowds like that? And honestly, I had to pinch myself when I first landed in Heathrow, because I'm just thinking, I've got my Australian blows on. I'm here representing Australia, and how good is it? And I was 20 when I first landed in England. And then, we had such a great team. We had a great coach in Bozo. And, when you tour, you bond with each other.
Yeah.
And, we'd train every day, but we'd also have a good time. And for me, it was outstanding, the trip. I actually broke my hand the week before my 21st. No, I broke my hand the week before the opening test match.
Yep.
At Wembley.
That was in a fight, wasn't it?
Yeah, got into a fight with a guy by the name of Phil Ford. So basically, we're playing leads, and two blokes attacked him, and they were throwing punches. And I'm more of a lover, not a fighter. I went in and hit Phil Ford and broke my hand straight away, and then I had to start throwing them with my left, and I wasn't very good at doing that. But that was my 21st. That was the day I turned 21.
Wow.
So I broke my hand. I'll always remember when I turned 21. It was the day I broke my hand. And then we had a party actually organised back at the hotel we were staying at, the Ramada Hotel in Manchester. And I remember going back, and my hand was busted, and we had Johnny Lewis on the trip, and I sort of didn't feel like sort of celebrating sort of too much. So I had a few beers, but I was sort of more sort of shocked that I'd be missing out on that first test match. But it was amazing, because myself and Mickey Hancock were around the same day. So we both turned 21. Cliffy Lyons was around that time, and the Walters boys turned 20. Their birthdays on the 20th of October as well. So I think Cliffy was either the 19th or 20th.
Wow.
And Mick Hancock was around the same. So there's 5 of us within a day of each other, and it was all our birthdays. So we had a big party back at the Ramada Hotel in Manchester. But unfortunately, I broke my hand that day and missed out on the first test at Wembley.
Who was your roomie on that tour, and what did you learn, good or bad, from them?
My roomie was Ricky Stewart,
and
what I learned was I was a lot cleaner than Ricky. He just threw everything around the room. But no, we had a great time, and obviously being mates and being club teammates was very good, because you knew one another, and you could spend a bit of time with each other, but you didn't hang out of each other's pockets, because you were with different groups all the time. So it was really good. It was a fun tour, and we were able to enjoy each other's company. And after losing that first test under pressure, we ended up winning the second and third test and winning the Ashes.
Well, fast forward to 1994, you'd win another premiership. It was your third. Do you remember this?
Ferner it is now. Gets the pass away. It's a Daley that capitalises, runs through the gap, over the 30. Support is coming. Daley, he won't need it. Daley, he scores. Daley puts it down. Third try.
I can remember it. I can remember it like it was yesterday. Fernsey sort of running to the line and then popping it back, and just seeing some space and going for it. And I remember when I got into the clear, I thought, because I always had hamstring troubles, and I never ever actually felt confident after I had those hamstrings to actually go flat out. Even though I might have looked like I was going, I always reckon I held something in reserve. And my left hemi was the one that I had a lot of issues with. And I remember when I was running, and I thought, I'm going to step him here. I'm going to step him back on the inside. And then I thought, oh, no, I won't. Something just took over me, and I just sort of tried to run around him and get to the corner. But I remember Scotty Wilson coming across and trying to tackle me, and then sort of bouncing over and scoring. But it's always special if you score a try in a big game. And, when you score from, 50 metres, it's great as well. But at the end of the day, I think anyone would tell you, no matter what you do in a game, as an individual, it's the result is all about, is what you care about, sorry. And if you don't get the win, it doesn't matter whether you score 3 tries, it doesn't matter whether you've come up with 70 tackles, you're gutted, you're disappointed. You can get man of the match in a losing side, but it just doesn't feel great. You want to share that success with everyone.
Yep.
And that's how I felt. It's like, that 89 grand final. I didn't have my best game in 89, but it's probably the greatest moment I've ever had as a club, in a club team, with our first grand final. It was just, I don't think I could ever replicate the euphoria that I had after that game. All our grand final wins were different. 90 was a relief. 89 was just pure, exhilarated, just how great is this? This is the best thing since sliced bread. And even 94 was different as well. It just felt like, it felt like we would have had a bad year if we didn't win. That's what it felt like, 94. So it was more relief.
Mal Meninga would retire, then Super League would hit. Do you recall the first time you heard about this rival competition?
I did, but I never sort of took it too seriously, because the first time someone mentioned it was on the 94 Kangaroo Tour. And it was like, this competition could start. And everyone was like, oh, yeah, but, a bit of a pie in the sky idea.
Yep.
And then sort of never heard anything about it. And then we got to the stage where it might have been just before the competition started. It started to pick up momentum.
Yeah.
And then we had some talks, I reckon, about it. and as a group. And one thing we did say was if anything happens, then we'd all like to stay together. So regardless of what happens as a club, regardless of what happens as a playing group, we wanted to stay together. And then I remember getting a phone call. We might have had a meeting. I think we had a meeting, actually. And we were heading up to play the Cowboys, who were just new in the competition. And they said, when we get to Townsville, we've got a meeting with News Limited representatives at the casino. And they want to talk to you about this new competition that we've been discussing, which is Super League. And they'd like to get your thoughts on it. And we all go, yeah, no worries. This sounds pretty exciting. And that's sort of how it all sort of unfolded, and that's where it sort of happened, because we go to this meeting and then, they were telling us about what they were doing. They were telling us about the type of money that we would earn. And all of a sudden, that just blew everyone's minds away. What was happening? All of a sudden, you were going from X amount to a huge amount of money that we'd never seen or dreamt of before. And that started, everything rolling along, the ball starting to get going, because it was a stage where they were saying that they had a number of clubs that were prepared to sign, and once one did it, then the others were going to follow. So it sort of happened pretty quickly, to be honest with you.
Griffin Air Conditioning offers the highest quality of air conditioning sales and service across the Sydney metropolitan area, providing installation and maintenance to commercial, domestic and industrial customers. Working with this team, you'll be guaranteed the latest services, technology and developments in the industry. Visit griffinair.com.au and tell them we sent you for a cool deal. More money for everyone. Fucking beauty. Right concept, right theory, poor execution. That's my look at it. Would you agree with that?
I think if you had your time over again, I think you'd certainly look at doing things differently. But at the time, in retrospect, you can't take anything back. It certainly caused some damage to the game, and it caused a lot of people to be disillusioned with rugby league, and that was a shame. From a player's point of view, and again, this is I can only speak for myself. I thought that it would come back together. I thought eventually they would come back together and there wouldn't be this split. At the time, it was for us. We just saw the dollar signs, and we saw that everyone was sticking together, and we saw the Raiders were going to be part of this competition. And I've always said, until you walk in someone else's shoes, it's hard to judge what you would do. And it's like, you being a barman in one pub, and you're working and you're getting 20 grand a year, and then someone says to you, well, mate, you come and work at my pub and I'll give you $300,000 a year to do the same. And while people can sit back and say, oh, well, you should have considered X, Y, and Z. As a young bloke, I didn't really consider anything like that. I was just looking at sort of what my mates, well, first of all, I was looking at what the dollar was. How much was I going to earn, what my club was doing, and what my teammates were going to do as well. And as you get a bit more mature, you sit back and you realise that it's probably not the right way to look at it. You should have thought about it a bit more, but at the time, that's how it unfolded.
Financial is fact. It is the number one priority, yet still in 2020 we have players saying, I want to move cities to be closer to my family, or I want to do this, or I want to go to a new club for a challenge. It's about bucks, and I get it, as it should be, because your career span is limited. Mate, after your retirement, you went into coaching. We'll go back into the mid-90s. Mal Meninga returned to the Canberra Raiders as coach. How did you find it? Your mate was now the boss.
Yeah, it was different. but it was also because Tim Sheens had left to go to the Cowboys after Super League. So the Raiders really needed some stability, and I think Mal wanted to try his hand as a coach. And he did that, and we made the semis a number of times. At the start, I've got to say, when you go from playing to coaching, it is hard when you've played with players. But after a while, Mal was always that guy that you saw as a coach anyway, if you know what I mean. So while he was a player and then came on 3 years later as the coach, it always, to me, it always felt strange to start with, but then it was like, it's like Mal just giving a speech at halftime as the captain. Some of the other boys, younger blokes, obviously had never played with Mal, and they just idolised him and hung off every word. And then it was a challenge because Super League happened in 97, and then after Super League, the comps got back together, and clubs that had a number of high-profile and highly paid players on their books, they had to come back to a salary cap, and they were only given 12 months to do that. So they had to shed players. A lot of players had signed 5 and 7 year deals on big money, but you could not keep all those players. So the game got together and said, we'll allow it to happen for 1 year. But after that 1 year, if you haven't got your house in order, bad luck. So there was a lot of manoeuvring, and there was a lot of players getting moved on that were on big money that would have loved to have stayed. And Ricky and Clyde would have loved to have stayed at the Raiders. But the fact that everyone had to come in under the salary cap, some big decisions had to be made. So, but Mal, I enjoyed his coaching. I think if you asked him, he enjoyed it, but it's different being a coach, and to be straight out of the playing ranks into coaching. I think it's hard. But you look at what he's done now with that Queensland side has been absolutely brilliant. But he was certainly a guy that commanded everyone's respect, and we enjoyed playing for him and under him. He was just a tremendous leader, both on and off the field.
You mentioned Ricky Stuart and Bradley Clyde moving to the Bulldogs. Was probably the second time you had experienced it after 92, where a bunch of guys had left. How was it playing against these two guys that were mates, that were teammates basically for a decade, that you shared so many great memories with?
Oh, it's strange. They're very weird. I remember there would have been a time where I can't remember the player, but whoever it was had changed clubs. And we're talking about coming up against the Bulldogs, and I was talking about how it would be weird playing against Ricky and playing against Clyde. One of the guys came to me and goes, "Oh, mate, the only tip I can give you is don't make eye contact with Ricky Stuart." I said, "What?" And he said, "Mate, if you come to a scrum, just don't make contact with him." I said, "Right." And he said, "Mate, he'll just give you a mouthful." So, but it was funny because it just felt really weird. And I think, they were sort of up to play against Canberra, and we were up to play against them. But it was just quite weird. I remember tackling Bradley and having a bit of a push and a shove. And at the time, because you're so invested in the game, you're not realising who it was.
Yeah.
After it, you're sort of going, "Oh, sorry, mate." I'll apologise for that one.
Did you cop any special treatment from your angry ex-halfback and good mate Ricky?
No, he was very good. And I'll tell you what, in the back of my mind, I knew not to look at him too, going to the scrum.
You were great mates with Ricky and had played almost all your footy together as 6 and 7. Mal took the captaincy off Rick when he was still at the club and gave it to you. I've interviewed both these guys and they've had their say. All of a sudden, you're the man in the middle, the innocent bystander who was the new captain because Ricky was pissed. So difficult and different times at training.
Yeah, it was. But I think at the end of the day, I was a leader in my own right.
Yes.
With the leader. And I think that was the year, I think Rick might have been sick. I think he was crook.
Yeah.
And I think he didn't play a lot of footy that year. And I think I took over, and then when he came back, I think they decided that I was going to be the captain moving forward. And obviously, you know, it puts a bit of a strain on things because you're a mate, and then your mate is the captain and he wants to be captain, and then you're there, you'd like to be captain, and then you know, all of a sudden you are the captain, and you've got to sort of try and work it out and come together. So it was sort of like that, I suppose, when Mel retired in '94. You know, I'd captained Australia, I was captain of New South Wales in '92, '93 and '94, and I thought, oh, this would be a good opportunity for me to become captain of the Raiders when Mel retired. And I missed out, and Ricky became captain. So, you know, I was disappointed, obviously, then, and had to move on. And I think that's what you do as a player. You're a little bit disappointed, and, you know, you ask yourself, well, why wasn't I given the position? But I think then you sort of realise that it's all not so much about you, it's about whether you want to sort of sit, whinge and complain, or whether you want to get on with playing footy and helping the club have success. So I think it's natural that you have that disappointment, and I think it's natural that you start questioning yourself, why, how, you know, all those type of things. But at the end of the day, you've just got to go, right, bite the bullet. The decision's been made. I'm going to move on here. I want to play footy. I want to win with my teammates. I want to have success. And I think that's what we both did.
If you're enjoying Andy Raymond Unfiltered, the Legends series, we'd love for you to go to Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening and subscribe to the podcast and give us a 5-star rating and review. Best weekly review wins an Unfiltered Trucker's hat.
The debate, which side is the best side of all time, is a beauty. I always go back to the Parramatta side of the early 80s, but I've got them playing the Raiders side of the early 90s. Did you guys realise just how good a football side this was at the time, or don't you think like that?
No. I'll tell you what you do think, Andy. I remember sitting in a dressing shed before any big game and looking around going, you know what, if he plays well, if he plays well, if he plays well, I play well, he plays well, we're going to be hard to beat.
Yep.
And we should win.
Yeah.
I always had that. In terms of whether we thought we were the greatest team, no. As in the greatest of all time, no. Never ever thought like that. But I just remember when you're playing in those good teams and the years we won the comps, not so much 89, but 90 and 94, you knew that if we play our best, we're going to win. There was no doubt in my mind that if we turned up and we put our best foot forward, we were going to win. And that's that wasn't being arrogant. That was just looking around. We'd have, you know, we in 1990 we could have had, I don't know, 5 to 7 players that were considered to be the best player in their position in the world, in the one side. That's a pretty handy start.
An awesome footy side. You spoke earlier, mate, about your hamstring issues. The knees were also a little average by the mid to late 90s in particular. How bad did they get? How restricting or painful were they?
Probably towards the end of my career, Andy. So I sort of had a bad back, and then I did my hammies early. Then I had meniscus taken out of my knee. I had no meniscus, so just the wear and tear of my joint. And I used to sort of hobble a lot when I was running, and it didn't feel sort of comfortable until I started to warm up. And then over, you know, a long period of time after all the pre-seasons, the sort of last 3 years of my career were not great. Playing-wise on the field was still good, but just trying to prepare for a game, training-wise, I felt a little bit of a disconnect between the team and I, because I was training indoors while they were training outdoors.
Yeah.
So all my fitness work was done inside. And you just don't feel as part of it as what you do when you're out there all the time. And the reason that I was training indoors was to keep me off my legs, to make sure that I had longevity and make sure that I could play on the weekends and then continue to play. And then sort of went through a stage where because I had no meniscus and there was a lot of rubbing away of my bone, the doc would go in and drill it. So he'd drill my bone to make it bleed, and that'd form sort of a roughage over the surface. And that'd take a while to heal, and then I'd be able to run again. Oh. But then, after the end of the season, that'd be sort of worn away again. And then the doc goes, well, mate, if you continue this, he said, you're going to have a arthritic knee, which I have anyway. But he said you won't be able to walk. That's what I did to sort of get through the last sort of couple of years of my career. And you know what? I wouldn't have changed it. Yes, I've got arthritis. Yes, I need a knee reconstruction. Not a knee reconstruction, a knee replacement. But to spend those extra couple of years playing when I thought I may have had to retire, so be it. And it's one of the things that you put up with now. But I wouldn't have changed anything.
A host of accolades, far too many to mention. I'd like your thoughts on a few, though. What the following means to Laurie Daley, the bloke. An oval in Junee being named Laurie Daley Oval.
Very humbling. When I left Junee, I never thought that would have been a possibility. I grew up there. I played football on that oval. I played cricket on that oval. And to go back there and just to see it in my hometown, I think I get emotional about it. I get very proud, and it's something that my family all enjoy. And it's something that my grandkids, their kids, it will always be there for them, and they'll always ask the question, what relation were we to Laurie? So it's going to be there into the future. So for me, that's pretty humbling, and for a country boy that loves where I'm from, I love Junee. I love going back there. I've got plenty of friends there. My best mate's still there. It's one of those things that I think I said before. When you play a team sport, play rugby league, you don't play for the individual awards. You play either, depending on what level, you'll either play because you love your mates, you'll play because you love the game, and you'll play because you want to win with the team you're in, and have that success with each other. And that's why I played. And to have these individual things, like a name, the oval named after me, it's just humbling.
What about the statue at Canberra Stadium?
That's another one, Andy. When I first retired and they said that they'd like to do that for me, I was just blown away because, you hear about these things happening to other people, not yourself.
Yep.
And you never see yourself as being as good as, some of the legends of the sport that have had statues at their ground put in for them. So I never thought that would actually happen to me, and to have it again there, and I go back to that stadium and I see it, not so much for me, but my kids and family. You might have your cousin's kids or something walk past and they go, "Oh, we related to that guy," or whatever it may be. I just think it's something that I never thought would happen. I'm really grateful that they see fit to have something like that of me at the stadium, and I just hope that people appreciate it and they continue to remember who I was.
What about being recognised as a national contributor and awarded the Member of Order of Australia?
Yeah, again, I'm very proud of that, because you want to leave great memories and you want to leave sort of legacies behind. And I think that one thing that you're always proud of, I'm always proud of, is being myself. Being a guy that's always, I think we started off this conversation about being genuine, being humble and being respectful. They're three things that I'd like to think I am. And, again, mate, I never played the game to receive awards. I played the game because I loved it, and I played the game because I wanted to win with my mates. But yeah, it's always very humbling, mate, when people want to share accolades with you and talk about you in certain ways and manners, because I just get blown away.
Are there any regrets, significant regrets across the journey? Is there anything you change?
Oh, I don't think there's anything I'd change. I was quite lucky through my football career, and this is where I probably differ from a lot of ex-players. I was lucky enough to make the choice on when I decided to retire.
Yeah.
And when I mean lucky, my body was giving out on me. So I knew it was time, and I knew I had 14 wonderful careers. I reckon if I had only got 10 years out of my career, or I played 3 games and then I broke down and couldn't continue on, and I still had that love and passion of playing, and I couldn't reach the levels that I wanted to do, I think I'd still be hurting inside, and I'd still have regrets. There's obviously a lot of things, mate, that you could do differently. There's a lot of things that you would have done differently off the field. There's a lot of things you would have done differently on the field. But nothing that I regret. There's things that you'd certainly change and you'd be better at. But in terms of looking back and regretting, I don't think I've got anything, to be perfectly honest with you. You could have looked after yourself a lot better. You could have done a lot of things. But at the end of the day, that was the era that I grew up in. And it's a completely different era to today's environment. We could go out and have a beer. You could go out to nightclubs. You could go out and celebrate after games.
Yep.
These days, it's all about, making sure you get fluids back into your body, jumping in ice bars, getting your recovery sorted, making sure that, you're right to play the following week, alcohol bans, all this type of stuff. So, yeah, we had a fun time. In the era that I grew up in the 90s, when, the Tina Turner ad was going, and Winfield Cup, it was very special.
I reckon if it wasn't for the dicky knees, you'd still be running rings round them and doing it with a smile on your face. As good as I have seen. Laurie Daley, you, sir, are a legend.
A new episode of the Legends series drops every Tuesday, and the weekly Wodge every Thursday. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening, and follow us on social media at The Andy Raymond. Then you won't miss a thing. Come back soon, Legends.